They say we're wired to survive. But what if part of your mind is quietly rooting for your destruction? Sigmund Freud believed that hidden deep within every human, there's a force just as powerful as the instinct to live, an instinct to die. Not a passing thought, not a moment of weakness, but a relentless pull towards self-destruction, chaos, and even the strange seduction of death itself. He called it Thanatos, the death drive. You've felt it before, haven't you? That little voice that whispers when you're standing on a high balcony, "What if you just jumped?" Or when you're driving on an empty road and you imagine swerving into oncoming traffic, not because you want to die, but because part of you wonders what it would feel like. Creepy? Yes. But also universal. Psychologists say it's not madness, it's built into us. And it's more connected to pleasure, risk, and even love than you could ever imagine. Once you see how the death drive works, you'll start noticing it everywhere, in the news, in relationships, in your own thoughts. And the scariest part? You can't ever fully escape it. If you're ready to uncover the unsettling truth about your own mind, and why danger can feel disturbingly tempting, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves deep psychological dives. Trust me, you'll never think about human nature the same way again. The birth of a dark theory. Sigmund Freud wasn't afraid to wander into the darkest corners of the human mind. Most people in his time, and even now, like to believe that human nature is built on the desire to survive, reproduce, and avoid pain. But as Freud sat with his patients, listened to their confessions, and analyzed their unconscious slips of the tongue, he began to see a disturbing pattern. People kept repeating behaviors that harmed them. It wasn't just accidents. It wasn't just bad luck. It was as if something deep inside them wanted the damage. One of the turning points came during his work with World War I veterans. These men returned from the trenches deeply traumatized, suffering from what we would now call PTSD. But here's the strange thing. Many of them kept reliving their most horrifying moments in dreams, flashbacks, and even waking fantasies. Instead of their minds avoiding trauma, they seemed to be drawn to it like moths to a flame. Freud began to suspect that there was a psychological force that pushed people toward repeating pain, danger, and destruction. A force that couldn't be explained by the usual idea of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. That's when he began to speak of two opposing drives. Eros, the life instinct, pushing us toward survival, love, creation, and pleasure, and Thanatos, the death drive, pulling us toward stillness, destruction, and ultimately, non-existence. Thanatos wasn't about wanting to die in the moment. It was more subtle, more insidious. It was an unconscious pull toward ending tension, toward returning to a state of calm, and in Freud's view, the ultimate calm was death. This theory didn't come out of thin air. Freud saw it reflected in myths, art, and even childhood games. He famously described watching his young grandson play a game where he'd throw a toy away and then reel it back in with a string. Freud interpreted this as a way of mastering loss, but also as an unconscious rehearsal for the cycles of disappearance and return, life and death. He also noticed it in adult relationships. People who left abusive partners only to find themselves in the same type of relationship again. Risk-takers who survived one near-death experience and went looking for the next. People who sabotaged their own success just when things were going well. These patterns made Freud wonder, what if the human mind isn't just built to live, but to die? The concept was unsettling, even for Freud's followers. Many rejected it. But for Freud, Thanatos was not just about literal death. It was about the urge to dissolve, to return to nothingness, to end the struggle that life demands. And once you start seeing it, it's hard to stop. It's in our stories, our dreams, our relationships, and maybe even in the decisions you made today. When pleasure meets destruction. If Freud's idea of a death drive sounds morbid, it becomes even more unsettling when you realize how closely it's intertwined with pleasure. Our brains aren't neatly divided between good and bad impulses. Sometimes, the very circuits that light up when we feel joy, excitement, and satisfaction are the same ones triggered by danger, destruction, and chaos. Think about the thrill of standing too close to the edge of a cliff. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and yet, There's a strange part of you that doesn't want to step back. Or the intoxicating rush of driving too fast on an empty road. You know it's dangerous, but that's what makes it feel alive. This is where Thanatos and Eros start to dance together in a dangerous waltz. Neurologically, this happens because the brain's reward system, fueled by dopamine, isn't just activated by safety and comfort. It also responds to novelty, intensity, and risk. A 2010 study from Vanderbilt University found that people with higher dopamine receptor levels were more likely to engage in risky behavior. It's not that they want harm, it's that risk itself feels rewarding. And that's exactly where the death drive hides in plain sight. Freud noticed this overlap long before we had brain scans to prove it. He saw patients who found themselves strangely exhilarated by things that hurt them. Destructive relationships, gambling losses, even emotional breakdowns. Pain for them wasn't just pain. It was tangled up with desire. This is why dangerous habits can be so addictive. Take thrill seekers who chase extreme sports, gamblers who keep betting after massive losses, or people who stay in toxic love affairs long after they know the damage. On the surface, it might look like they're chasing happiness. But at a deeper, unconscious level, they might be chasing the quiet seduction of destruction. Even in sexual behavior, Freud observed what he called the fusion of life and death instincts, the way passion could be tinged with aggression and vulnerability with dominance. Modern research into edge play in relationships and certain high-intensity experiences supports this link. The boundaries between pleasure and danger are not just blurred, they're often overlapping. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The more we push ourselves to the edge, the more our brains can start craving that edge. This is why the thrill of danger often fades unless we increase the stakes. What starts as an adrenaline rush can become a quiet addiction to risk, and risk is the playground of Thanatos. When you realize this, you start seeing it everywhere, in movies that make danger look sexy, in the popularity of true crime stories, in the way people can't look away from disasters. Part of us is drawn to the abyss, not despite the danger, but because of it. Everyday encounters with Thanatos. You don't have to be an adrenaline junkie or a soldier in combat to feel the death drive tugging at you. In fact, it often hides in plain sight, woven into the smallest decisions of daily life. The truth is, Thanatos isn't always about grand, dramatic acts of destruction. Sometimes, it's about the quiet, almost invisible ways we sabotage ourselves. Take procrastination. On the surface, it seems harmless. You put off a project, delay a call, skip a workout. But over time, these small acts erode your goals, your health, and your opportunities. Deep down, part of you might even know you're doing damage. And yet, you keep doing it. That's Thanatos at work. A slow drip of self-destruction that feels strangely comfortable. Then there's the accidental drama we invite into our lives. Ever notice how some people seem to attract chaos? Arguments flare up, money disappears, relationships implode. Again and again. It's not always bad luck. Sometimes, it's a subconscious pull toward tension and collapse, because the mind craves the release that comes when things fall apart. Even those strange, intrusive thoughts you get, like imagining stepping in front of a train, blurting out something shocking in a meeting, or veering off the road, are tiny flashes of Thanatos. Psychologists call this the call of the void, l'appel du vide in French. Most people never act on these impulses, but their very existence hints at an undercurrent inside us that isn't fully invested in survival. Relationships are another breeding ground for everyday death drive behavior. How many times have you seen someone leave a healthy relationship to chase a partner who treats them worse? Or destroy trust by lying when telling the truth would have been easier? It's not logical, and that's the point. Thanatos isn't logical. It's emotional, unconscious, and often disguised as just how I am. We even see it in work and ambition. Ever heard of fear of success? Some people get close to achieving their dreams, then pull the plug themselves. Missed deadlines, sudden withdrawals, self-sabotaging choices, as if part of them can't handle the stability or satisfaction that would come with success. The comfort of chaos wins again. The scary part? Society rewards some of these behaviors. We romanticize the tortured artist, the reckless hero, the passionate lover who can't help themselves. Movies, music, and social media feed us the idea that a life without risk, pain, and mess is boring. In doing so, they give the death drive a stage and an audience. Once you start spotting Thanatos in the mundane, it's hard to unsee it. That skipped meal, that reckless text, that dangerous flirtation with disaster. They're not random. They're part of an ancient, unconscious script written into the human mind. A script we all follow, whether we realize it or not. The science behind the urge. For decades, Freud's death drive theory was dismissed by many as more philosophy than science. But modern psychology and neuroscience have started uncovering evidence that, while Freud's explanation might not have been perfect, his instincts were disturbingly accurate. Let's start with the brain's reward system. At its core, this system is designed to reinforce behaviors that help us survive: eating, bonding, reproducing. But it's not a perfect guardian. The brain rewards anything that triggers a dopamine spike, even if it's destructive. Drugs, gambling, dangerous driving, they all hijack the same system that's supposed to keep us alive. It's like having a security guard who sometimes opens the door for the intruder. Researchers at the University of Cambridge found that people prone to risk-taking showed heightened activity in the ventral striatum, the brain's pleasure center, even when facing potentially harmful outcomes. The risk itself was rewarding, separate from any positive result. This echoes Freud's idea that we sometimes pursue destruction not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. Then there's the phenomenon of repetition compulsion, a concept Freud introduced that modern psychology continues to study. It's the tendency to repeat painful experiences, even when we consciously want to avoid them. In 2018, a study in Frontiers in Psychology found that individuals with unresolved trauma often recreate similar situations: abusive relationships, high-stress jobs, self-sabotaging choices, as if unconsciously drawn back into the storm. Neuroscience also points to the default mode network, a set of brain regions active during rest and self-reflection. This network is heavily involved in rumination and imagining future scenarios, including dark or destructive ones. Overactivity here is linked to depression and suicidal ideation, suggesting that our idle mind can sometimes be our most dangerous state. Even evolutionary psychology offers unsettling clues. Some researchers propose that risk-taking, even when dangerous, had potential benefits for early humans, securing status, mates, or resources. In that context, the death drive might have been an adaptive edge. But in the modern world, where survival doesn't depend on wrestling predators or braving deadly hunts, that ancient wiring can turn inward, targeting us instead of the environment. What's especially chilling is how this wiring interacts with emotional pain. Studies show that the brain processes social rejection and physical pain in overlapping areas, like the anterior cingulate cortex. When emotional pain becomes chronic, the urge to end it permanently can start to feel like relief, not fear. This could explain why Thanatos isn't just about reckless thrills, but also about the quiet, calculated urge to stop existing. So while science may not frame it exactly as Freud did, the evidence is clear. Our brains carry within them mechanisms that can make destruction, even self-destruction, feel rewarding, compelling, and at times, inevitable. Living with your death drive. If the death drive is wired into us, does that mean we're powerless against it? Not at all. Freud may have seen Thanatos as an unavoidable part of human nature, but modern psychology also offers ways to work with it, even transform it, instead of letting it quietly steer us toward destruction. The first step is recognition. You can't manage what you won't admit exists. Start noticing the small patterns. The way you procrastinate on things that matter, the unnecessary drama you let into your life, the risky situations you find exciting. Ask yourself, is this really what I want? Or is part of me just chasing the comfort of collapse? Awareness alone won't erase the death drive, but it robs it of its ability to work entirely in the shadows. Next comes redirection. Thanatos isn't pure evil, it's energy. And like any psychological energy, it can be channeled. Some people turn destructive urges into creativity, writing dark fiction, painting disturbing art, performing high-intensity sports in controlled environments. Others redirect them into physical challenges. Martial arts, endurance training, even cold exposure. These activities let you flirt with danger in a way that tests your limits without tipping into actual harm. There's also the power of connection. Isolation is a breeding ground for destructive impulses. The more disconnected we feel, the more tempting it becomes to dissolve entirely. Close relationships, whether friendships, family bonds, or communities with shared purpose, act like psychological anchors, keeping us from drifting too far toward the abyss. It's no coincidence that strong social ties are one of the biggest protective factors against self-destructive behavior. Mindfulness and therapy can also rewire your relationship with Thanatos. Practices like meditation increase awareness of fleeting thoughts without letting them dictate action. And certain therapeutic approaches, like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, or EMDR for trauma, help dismantle the repetition compulsion, breaking the unconscious loops that keep drawing you back to pain. Importantly, you need to learn to differentiate between thrill and relief. The rush of risk feels different from the numb peace of giving up, but in the moment, the brain can blur them together. If you catch yourself seeking relief in ways that could end badly, pause. Ask, is there another way to get this feeling without paying the ultimate cost? Finally, remember that Thanatos isn't an enemy to destroy. It's part of the same mind that houses your creativity, resilience, and curiosity. Suppressing it completely is impossible, and trying might make it more dangerous. The goal is integration, accepting that you carry both life and death instincts, and choosing, day after day, which one you'll feed. The death drive will always whisper. The art of living is learning when to listen and when to turn away.